We can't continue to let those who are innocent suffer while the guilty get away without punishment. While trying to be fair, while hoping to be merciful, we've forfeited fairness and mercy. In the name of justice, we've cheerfully sold off the right of the honest man to live off the fruits of his honest work. So stay here and work here, because if you flee, if everyone runs, then you've surrendered your life, your happiness and your freedom to the criminal element. In effect, you've allowed them to win. And it's time for the little man to win. Hello and welcome to the Comics Conversation. I'm your host Roberto, and today I'm going to be looking at a series most dismissed as a Punisher ripoff, 1985's Vigilante. Before I get started, I just want to offer a quick trigger warning, as this video will contain discussions on suicide and child abuse. Created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist George Perez, the Vigilante appears to be another Punisher knockoff, a hero whose response to trauma is to shoot every criminal and let God sort them out. How true is that? Let's have a look at the Vigilante's 1980s comic series and see how it fits into the violent Avenger genre. The generally accepted origin of the genre is Mac Bolan, the Executioner. Brainchild of author and mustache owner Don Pendleton, the Executioner is the start of a series of novels running since 1969 with over 400 installments. The Executioner is Mac Bolan, a Vietnam veteran brought home after his father suffers a psychotic break and kills almost his entire family and then himself. Discovering that his father's madness was caused by his family's involvement with a mafia loan shark, he resolves to solve the problem by declaring war on the mafia. He proceeds to blow the heads off of everyone in the local mafia family using the skills he developed in Vietnam as an army sniper. The novels are fun reads, full of absurd violence and hyper-masculine competency on Bolan's part. It's easy to see how this started a genre. The Executioner inspired several knockoffs with equally violent names, things like The Marksman, The Eliminator, and The Penetrator. Movies like Dirty Harry equally encourage extrajudicial punishment of criminals. In the world of comics, the Punisher takes obvious inspiration with a near-identical origin and modus operandi to the Executioner. The general agreement the many Executioner-type stories have is that the system is broken. There are criminals who get away with their crimes. The key difference is in their understanding of the nature of the violence they employ. Pendleton and his contemporaries argue that the violence used by these heroes is needed, it's restorative. The system is broken, and we can fix it by excising these bad elements who break the social contract. In an interview printed in Marvel Preview Issue 2, Pendleton describes this as, "The insulation does break down though, in disturbing patterns, and this is why cops carry guns and nations arm themselves into bankruptcy. Life is perpetuated only through violence, but there are two kinds. Destructive violence defeats the evolutionary movement if unchecked. Constructive violence is the check, usually, and operates to advance the cause of evolutionary life. However, not every work featuring this kind of hero is in favour of their actions. The Punisher, as argued by co-creator Jerry Conway, symbolises that the existence of such a character is a sign that things are wrong. That people feel hopeless enough to start these concerted attacks on lawbreakers shows that the system is broken, and their solutions are only going to make things worse in the long run, for themselves and for society." Conway said, in an interview with Sci-Fi Wire, "The Punisher represents a failure of the justice system. He's supposed to indict the collapse of social moral authority, and in reality some people can't depend on institutions like the police or the military to act in a just and capable way." Existential psychologist Rollo May described this in his 1972 book Power and Innocence. "Violence is a symptom. The disease is variously powerlessness, insignificance, injustice. In short, a conviction that I am less than human and I am homeless in the world. To strike the disease at its core requires that we deal with the impotence. Ideally, we must find ways of sharing and distributing power so that every person, in whatever realm of our bureaucratic society, can feel that he too counts, that he too makes a difference to his fellows and is not cast out on the dunghill of indifference as a non-person." May argues that one of the causes of violence in our society is a mythic break, the death of the traditional symbologies that provided meaning in our lives. Conway backs this up by describing the loss of faith in the police to keep us safe as a motivator for characters like the Punisher. Hence, we can see two kinds of urban vigilante story. One where violence is the solution, like the Executioner or the Death Wish films. The other, where violence is the symptom, like Conway's intentions for the Punisher. So where does the subject of today's video, the Vigilante, fall? The Vigilante is Adrian Chase, a crusading district attorney who first appears in the New Teen Titans issue 23. He's hard on crime, with little time for those limp-wristed liberals who care about things like due process or fair trials. He knows crime and wants it stopped. He is targeted for assassination by the mob, who plant a bomb in his apartment that kills his family. Chase suits up as a vigilante to get his revenge, killing the mob boss responsible. Already he's presented as a cautionary tale, as part of an ongoing subplot involving Titans leader Robin. He is inspired by his time with Chase as District Attorney to take a harder stance on criminals, but is turned away after seeing Vigilante's brutality as the end of that road. Between this appearance and the first issue of the ongoing series, house ads in DC comic books proclaimed, "When the law is not enough, my justice begins." With the Vigilante appearing aside a backdrop of newspaper headlines announcing several violent crimes, we see a very key message. Society is broken, the law is broken, and the Vigilante is here to fix it. The first issue, if taken at face value, seems pretty much as one would expect of the genre, with little to distinguish it from its predecessors. The opening pages, retailing Vigilante's origin, use a fairy tale framing device to establish the mythic break at the heart of all urban Vigilante stories. Good does not triumph over evil, and so this knight must take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. We have a wronged civilian crying for justice after her husband is imprisoned on the trifling matter of owning an unregistered handgun. Crooks make mocking toasts to justice while congratulating themselves on escaping jail time. Vigilante himself speaks tersely of rules of survival and the purity of his singular judgment. It ends with the main criminal shot dead by Vigilante in a Western-style showdown, justice served frontier style. This first issue was very poorly received by the Comics Journal. 2 articles in issue 86 savage it, with Lee Vochner describing Vigilante as a bad mimeograph copy of Marvel's Punisher, and the symbol of middle-class wishful thinking, a wasp wet dream for all the oppressed middle class. Arthur Yore's review, meanwhile, openly decries Vigilante's modus operandi as fascistic and unlikely to solve anything, remarking his prescription doesn't really solve anything, it just makes you feel better. However, this was likely Wolfman's intention. Present Vigilante as a very straight application of the genre's trappings, then subvert them quickly to explore the issues more thoroughly. These first issues very firmly plant Vigilante within the DC superhero universe, and with it the attendant superhero's morality. Despite the grim suggestions of his earliest appearances, soon Vigilante is sporting non-lethal tranquilizer guns and fighting brightly costumed mercenaries Sabre and Cannon. Chase even reveals the true origin of his Vigilante persona, where he is charged by a spiritual council to serve justice for the unavenged dead, and gifted superhuman stamina and healing to do so. An underlying plot thread of a major crime wave is interwoven with the Monitor storyline that leads into the major DC crossover Crisis on Infinite Earths, while the main antagonist is a cyborg nightmare worthy of Gibson. Throughout this, Chase's aide-de-camp JJ is killed investigating the mob, and research assistant Teresa leaves as Chase's obsession gets the better of him. It is only after this first year that Vigilante grounds itself, as Chase begins to question his mission in light of him taking up the mantle of a judge. His antagonists now are muggers and thugs, with a group of subway thieves putting one in mind of the finale of Death Wish. He reasons that he can't be both a violent vigilante and the arbiter of the law, and discards his gear. As new writer Paul Kopperberg takes the reins, a new person wearing the vigilante outfit is making the news, and this one possesses a lethal attitude. This second vigilante is revealed to be friend and fellow judge Adrian Wells. Wells is far more violent than Chase, openly executing criminals and even shooting cops. Seeing another vigilante, a murderous one no less, disturbs Chase, who resolves to put an end to this new imposter. Chase confronts Wells during an assault at a major crime boss's home. They also encounter the Electrocutioner, another lethal protector whom Chase had dealt with in previous issues. During the ensuing fracas, Chase kills a wounded Electrocutioner, and then Wells in self-defense, learning his identity in the end. Chase attempts to save Wells' good name by stripping him of the vigilante uniform and planting it on the Electrocutioner's corpse. He spirits away Wells' body, reporting it later to the police as Wells being the victim of a mugging. This is followed up by the appearance of a third vigilante, bailiff Dave Winston, a character who worked with Chase in court. He has an attitude similar to Chase's, in that the legal system is broken, and he acts as a safety valve to ensure nobody guilty gets away. Meanwhile, Chase is tailed by police detective Harry Stein, who's tweaked onto the fact that Wells' death was suspicious, and believes that Chase knows more than he's letting on. He's told not to investigate any further by his superiors, but keeps at it anyway, risking his career to do so. This culminates in Chase being brought to court, formally accused of the murder of Judge Wells. During a recess, Chase breaks down and tells Stein the entire story of everything that had happened in the series up until this point. Stein, Moved and sympathetic to Chase's story, deliberately blows the prosecution's case on the stand by admitting to obtaining evidence without a search warrant. Chase is exonerated of all charges and is now a free man. Issue 36 begins the final major story arc, and with it the great downfall of Adrian Chase. He takes a flight with his lover, Marcia King, to start a new life in the UK away from the spectre of the Vigilante and everything that's happened. Unfortunately, their plane is hijacked by terrorists while on the runway at Kennedy International Airport. Luckily, one crusading hero intervenes. The Peacemaker, making his first DC Comics appearance, starts blowing away the hijackers with impunity. Winston, realising that Chase is in trouble, rushes to the scene, and is killed by Peacemaker for his troubles. This is the moment of no return for Chase, seeing yet another person die because of his actions. His identity is revealed to the world, and so he abandons it, becoming only the Vigilante. Meanwhile, Harry Stein has been kicked off of the police force for his actions during the Chase trial. He's not unemployed for long though, as former superhero Valentina Vostok hires him to work for the agency, a government black ops task force. She believes Stein would be a useful handler for Chase, who they use as an agent on several dangerous missions, establishing the status quo for this last third of the series. In the final issue, Chase thinks through his life up to this point. He tots up the amount of dead bodies he left in his wake, not through direct action, but for the simple crime of being associated with him. Believing that his time as the Vigilante has been nothing but pain and suffering for everyone around him, and unable to control his violent impulses, he chooses to end things permanently. The stories themselves can't help but suggest that in their worldview some kind of extrajudicial force is needed to keep the peace, implying some sympathy for Pendleton's arguments for constructive violence. The earlier stories, being mostly grounded in the superhero universe, would attest to that fact. Vigilante operates as a check to a flawed legal system, ensuring that the guilty are made to pay for their crimes only when they're mistakenly released. His actions are more in line with a traditional superhero title, where he's fighting crime and leaving the defeated criminals for the police to deal with. Later on, Harry Stein ignores the direct command of his superiors to continue investigating Alan Wells' death and breaks several rules in his investigations, most notably obtaining evidence without a warrant. Ironically, Chase should now hunt himself down, as he's a criminal let go through poor administrative work, something he never does. Despite barreling through several police officers and military men in his zeal to catch the Peacemaker, Chase is implied to be allowed to walk free due to Vostok's government connections. He has several chances to start over with a clean slate, first in issue 36 after the trial, and again after encounter with the Batman gives him the opportunity to fake his death. It appears these characters can ignore their previous crimes as they please if it is to serve the greater good. However, we also see that these heroic actions are fleeting, and don't actually solve the issues in any way. Chase's work for the agency highlights this. In a story running through issues 39 and 40, Chase and Stein take on an international child slavery ring. The story ends with them patting themselves on the back how they've stopped this terrible crime, how parents can sleep well tonight, all played over the scenes of another abduction. Issue 44 has a major drug kingpin killed, but Chase bitterly reflects on how this won't do much to stop the influx of drugs into the USA, and create more dead bodies like the overdosed teenager in his arms. The stories are keen to remind us that nothing has really changed in these cases. The drug dealers, the child kidnappers, they still remain. The root cause of the issue has not been tackled at all. A letter in issue 44 from a victim of child molestation highlights this in great detail. I can wholeheartedly say that what the Vigilante is doing is the worst thing to do in this situation. Vigilante is just killing these people. When you just kill the guy, nothing can be rectified. One point of comparison with the Executioner is, as Pendleton says in the Marvel preview interview, any guy who would want to trade places with Mac Bolan has missed the entire point of the Executioner rationale. This guy is living in hell. Chase certainly goes through hell in these 50 issues. He loses several loved ones, friends, and his sanity at several points. After first giving up the mantle, he begins to question his own reason, fearing that he's going out as the Vigilante unconsciously. He confides in his lover, but this only serves to increase his burden with her. She witnesses Chase's mind deteriorate further as he sees more people copy his mistakes with the Vigilante. Much as in Death Wish, both the movie and the novel, his actions inspire others, ranging from well-intentioned copycats to racist mobs. The Death Wish movies present the inspired citizens as a symbol of an oppressed populace fighting back. However, there's nothing glamorous in the Vigilante's copycats. All major antagonists and all dark mirrors of Vigilante's mission taken to lethal extremes. The Electrocutioner, who hunted and fried petty thieves and crooks. Adrian Wells, a fellow judge also disillusioned with the justice system and seeking to dispense punishment without mercy. The religious bomber from issues 33 to 36, who commit acts of arson against sinners, killing innocents in his zeal. The peacemaker, who loves peace so much he's willing to kill for it. The Black Thorn, who poisons criminals for kicks. And finally, the homeless avenger, who murdered assailants of the destitute. What separates Chase from these? Other than a few platitudes, very little, especially after he retakes the mantle after Winston's death. All people driven to kill with little hesitancy by their beliefs. Of course, this is the point. Wolfman explicitly hinted at Chase's final destination in the second issue, and this comes full circle in the finale. As Chase himself puts it, as he raises his gun to his chin, "It was my job. I was supposed to rid the streets of killers and madmen, wasn't I?" Editor Mike Gold writes in the final letters column, "His desire to commit suicide, his actually pulling the trigger, is understandable if not acceptable. He had become the evil he was fighting." So what is Vigilante in the end? The novel Death Wish by Brian Garfield offers an excellent insight. There's a large reservoir of aggression in all of us. We hate crime, yet we don't do anything about it. We begin to feel that we're not merely decent people, we're so decent that we're immobilised. That's why a man like this captures our imagination so vividly. He's acting out fantasies we've all shared. One rugged individualist out there battling the forces of evil? It fits right into our mythology, you see. There's that word again, mythology. Once again, we come to Rollo May's words from earlier, about how the call to violence is heard by those whose innocence is shattered by the disruption of traditional meaning in life, as a means to reject the powerlessness they feel. And this is the sad story of Adrian Chase, the vigilante. His life was defined by maintaining the tenets of the law, and his attempts to reassert that through the lens of constructive violence only led to tragedy. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. A bit of a heavy subject, I know, but if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and start the conversation in the comments. I'll see you next time.